Well, welcome to the journey. My name is Kevin Polky, and I am the host of the journey. And today I have a special guest with us, Adam Stivers. He is right in the Rockford area right now, and working as let me make sure I had this right, Assistant State's Attorney's Office, right?
Nope, it's a public
No,
defender.
public defender. Okay, all right, public defender. And so the other side,
Yeah.
the other side of the other
Yeah.
side of the table. So today, we're able to record this today because we have the Juneteenth holiday is a legal holiday now, and so we are able to record earlier in the day. So Adam, welcome to the show, welcome to the journey, and
Thank you.
whenever I have someone come on, I always ask the question of, when you have an opportunity to have fun, what does Adam do to kind of get re-energized, to have some fun? What do you do for fun?
Well, the main thing is just traveling with my wife Amanda.
Okay.
And we have a Greyhound dog. And so number one is just, well, probably going for walks. That's my number one thing.
Okay.
I'm really excited about the weather finally getting hot again. That seems to be the only time that I really like to get outside is when it's super hot out. So I'm excited that I'm off today. So as soon as we're done here, I'm gonna head off to the park and go for a long walk. But yeah, that's basically it. We like to go up to the Lake Geneva area a lot. Fontana, we like to go to Pier 290 and just walk around the lake. And that's mostly it for us is quiet time and strolls.
Perfect. And how long have you and Amanda been together?
22 years.
Oh, well,
Yep.
congratulations.
Yep, and so we've been married 17 now.
Okay.
So yeah,
Wow. Well, congratulations.
thanks.
Are you from the Rockford area, or?
Yep, I grew up in all over the place, but mostly anchored around the Rockford area. And I went to Rockford University. That's where I met Amanda. She was visiting one of her friends there.
Okay.
It was Rockford College back then, which I think is a way cooler name, but they
Yeah.
changed it since then. And then yeah, we got married and moved to Florida for 2 years, but we decided we liked the Four Seasons too much and had to come back. And yeah, we've been living in Rockford now ever since 2008. So
Perfect. Okay. And then, what was when you were at Rockford College or Rockford University? What did you study at that time? What were you studying at that time?
I was an English major, so I have a bachelor's in English with a minor in secondary education, and was a teacher for 2 years at North Boone High School, right out of college. And then I went back to NIU to get my master's in British and American literature, and that's when I taught for 2 years down in Palm Beach County, Florida. We lived in Boynton Beach down there, and then in 2008, I decided to go to law school.
Okay. Yeah. Well, first tell us about a little bit about the idea of being an educator, and obviously have a passion for English, and stories and writing. But what led you originally to become an educator, and then tell us a little bit about then pivoting and going to law school.
Yeah, so I had, I mean, everybody knows this about me. I had a rough childhood, so I escaped into books, and that's what I did from as soon as I could read. I spent most of my time in school in the library reading, and when I would go to classes, we moved every year to a new place. So when I would go to the new place, I would just read everything for that year. And if the teacher gave us workbooks, things like that, I would just do all of them and then hand it into the teacher in like the first month and say, okay, I've done everything for the year. Can I go to the library now? And they would usually let me. And so when I was at Jackson Elementary here in Rockford, they didn't make me go to class basically ever. And I was there was a little teacher's lounge that was between all the classrooms. And I hung out in there and they had me grading the other kids' papers and stuff. So I've always been sort of doing that since I was a kid. So then, you take all the standardized tests. They test whether you read good or write good and do math good and things like that. And I always scored the best in reading and writing. And the recommendation on the end of the day always said teacher or lawyer. And so when I got up to college age, I said, you know what, I do like teaching. I'm going to give it a shot. And I taught for 2 years here, like I said, and then um, I was getting paid $28,000 a year with 100,000 in student loans by that time because I went to Rockford University. And so um, I knew that if I got a master's degree, you automatically got a pay bump. So I did that. And that only took me 18 months at NIU and then moved to Florida. I wanted I knew I wanted to have a terminal degree, some sort of doctoral degree, because I knew I was good at school and I wanted to achieve that goal ever since I was a kid. So when I started looking around, I figured out that there were no English professor positions basically in the whole country at that time. This was around 2006 and 7. Of course, the impending 2008 crash was coming, but nobody really knew it. But um, anybody who had a job in teaching was keeping it until their 70s, 80s, 90s, till you threw them out. And the only way to get a job as a professor was adjuncts. You had to be part-time or you could keep teaching in high school. So when I went to get a terminal degree, I called NIU and talked to them and I said, listen, what should I do here? NIU is such a good school. They have a really good program, especially for English. It's such a small little program, but they said, you can go to law school. And so I took the LSATs and applied at NIU back up here because I knew we were moving back and got in. And I started law school in August of '08, which is when Lehman Brothers crashed and the whole world went into a global recession. So that's how I became a lawyer.
Gotcha. Okay. And so you finished law school, what year, how long did it take you to go through law school?
3 years. So in 2011, May of 2011, I graduated and passed the bar, luckily on my first shot. But
Okay.
and then I had been working at a law firm in town here since 2009 as a clerk. I was lucky enough to get a clerkship as a 1L, what they call it, your first summer. So that and they paid me, so that was really lucky. And that was not the trend at the time. And so yeah, in our first January break, when we got back from Christmas break, they told us, I don't know if it was true, but they said, 10,000 lawyers in Chicago lost their jobs since August of '08, and you guys are going to have a real hard time. And when I got to that interview for my 1L clerkship, they said they were getting applications from partners in Chicago to come to Rockford to work as a clerk. So I considered it lucky to get any position at all.
Okay. Wow. So I did not realize at that time. I mean, I realized a lot of things that were happening and during that time period. My brother-in-law is does residential mortgages. So
Mm.
obviously I
Saw the inside of
saw the inside of that
that.
piece of it, and this guy is like the most honorable, high level of integrity. And so he rode the storm pretty well
Mhm.
because he never went down that path that a lot
Right.
of individuals did. And
Hmm.
and he just stayed true to who he was that whole time. So when he probably could have made a lot of money,
Hmm.
he chose to stay the narrow path. And so then when the storm came, he had a pretty strong foundation that people still,
Hmm.
went to him. Obviously refis were the big thing, more so than actual, people buying homes.
Hmm.
But I remember that time period. And I also remember, the counseling world was, still, I had KP in 2001, so it was steady.
Hmm.
But I bought the Linden building in 2010 and started off with
Hmm.
a wellness center,
Mm.
which conceptually may have been a good idea timing wise. It wasn't great timing, and
Yeah.
4 years later I ended up pivoting and closing that and expanding KP to the whole building
Hmm.
instead of splitting it up. But so I do remember that time period as well. So as then, once you passed the bar, have you always worked as a public defender, or?
No, I spent about 10 years saving rich people money on their taxes and
Okay.
absolutely hated it. It was a
Oh,
total nightmare.
okay.
But since I got that job, I just stayed and I found that a lot of my friends were doing the same thing. Wherever they got a hook in, they ended up staying there because it was, I don't know if Rockford ever recovered from '08, but it took a good 4 or 5 before people even started thinking that it was recovering. So that
Yeah.
was well into my, third or fourth year of practice, and I had a client base built up, and I worked with these two older guys. They were in their 80s and 90s. And so the things that I could do seemed like magic to them. So it was like, um, you know, drafting documents and making changes and all of that just was not a problem for me, obviously, with the English background and things like that. So, no, and so the practice was mostly estates and trusts. So I was planning, estate planning, and then handling administration of estates when people passed away.
Mm.
And with such old bosses, it was mostly, people had passed away because it was their clients that they had prepared these things for. So, and I didn't hate that part of it. I liked helping families through the storm, like you say, and I was, I guess, uniquely positioned to help people in that situation because I was basically blocked off emotionally, so I could be the guy that just goes in and says, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to do this, we need to do that, with like a crying widow.
Mhm.
And she took it as a sign of strength, and I, used that skill that I had to just move through that practice. But then eventually in about 2016, I struck out on my own and had my own practice called Stivers Legal for about 3 years. And that was doing really well, but it was just me. So I did everything. I was the secretary, I was the draft, um, the clerk, all of it. And it was just too much, and it was overwhelming and awful. So then everything came to a head in June of 2018. And so I took 18 months off then. And finally, one of my friends was leaving the public defender's office here in Rockford. And I said, you know what, I'm going to give it a shot. Uh, just because I have this completely different experience base doesn't mean I'm not going to find something that I could do there. So then I joined the public defender's office in December of 2019. So I worked here for a year in the DUI courtroom, and then they had an opening with the problem solving courts. And in 2019, I began giving talks about preventing attorney suicide. Um, and they understood that I was involved in the mental health community and things like that. So they assigned me to the problem solving courts when the opportunity came around. So, and that's drug court, mental health court, which we call tip court, and then veterans court. And then recently we started something called the wellness track, which is when people pick up a bunch of misdemeanors for things like trespass, nonviolent criminal damage to property, low level things, which usually means that they're homeless and they're squatting somewhere, frankly. So then the judges and the state's attorney and the public defender will recognize them as potentially needing the wellness track, and then they get assigned to me, and the state's attorney that I work with in the problem solving courts, and then one of the judges, Judge Gibbons. It's sort of his pet project. So we try to get people associated with mental health services in the community. And if they follow along for 3 or 4 weeks of doing that, then the case is ultimately dismissed. And that's our goal. So, yeah, so I found the absolute perfect position for me by a complete accident. But I really feel like there's not a better use of my law license than doing what I'm doing right now.
Sure. Yeah. And so, yeah, tell us a little bit about how, I mean, you talked about how learned how to compartmentalize
Mhm.
and
Yeah, you know all the terms for it.
yeah. So that you talked about, that shutting off that became an automatic response, right? We
Mhm,
have this armor that we have on all the time. Brene Brown, refers to it as this armor, and really is compartmentalizing or disassociation,
mhm,
as a survival or defense mechanism,
mhm,
right? Defense skill. And then, as we talk about, as as an English major, as Campbell talks about this idea that either we're going to get called to something and accept that call, or we're going to stay too long and hit a proverbial bottom,
mhm,
and get thrust over into the chasm. One way or another, it's going to happen,
mhm,
right? I mean, and I shouldn't say that. There's some people, right, that may figure out a way to continue avoiding than knocking on the door,
Mhm.
and that may, that may definitely end up happening. But for the most part, that, it's either we accept a call or we get thrust over there,
Mhm.
because we've stayed too long. Uh, Tell us a little bit about that piece where getting thrust over the chasm, and you can go into that aspect a little bit about that, but most importantly, what did you learn that you wouldn't have learned if that wouldn't have happened?
Yeah, so um, in 2018, and right in the middle of the year, um, I lost one of my big clients, and it was a big issue. But what what it did for me was, I guess I should give a little bit of a background so that um, since 2018, I've been in therapy once a week at least. And once I started to work on those issues, they help you realize what you had been dealing with for longer than you thought you did. So when I had a crisis with my business in 2018, it made me feel like that was going to be it, and I was just going to commit suicide. Um, and what I thought though when it happened was, okay, I'm not going to have to kill myself now. And I remember specifically what I did was I went to my office and I was sitting there and I was thinking, I actually was saying it out loud. You're not going to kill yourself. You're not going to kill yourself. You're not going to kill yourself. So what I have come to realize is that if I had kept going in my business, how I was doing it, I was setting up the dominoes to be able to take my life in a way that would have made it better for everybody else. So specifically, I had bought a nice house in 2017. We had taken our two trips that were on our bucket list. I was like 36 years old and had a bucket list, and you're not supposed to do that. I've learned that too. But we went to Iceland together for our 10th anniversary. And then we went to a week in London and a week in Paris in 2017. We had gone to New York a couple times. So we had gotten all of the traveling that I had checked off the bucket list, and I had gotten a nice house. It had a place where my wife could teach yoga. And then one of the last things in May of 2018, I got $1 million life insurance policy. And I actually asked the insurance agent, now this covers suicide, right? And he said, yeah, and wrote me the policy without any other questions about it. So I was making all of these preparations, and I feel like I probably wouldn't have made it to 2019 if there hadn't been this tremendous shakeup that happened in June. Um, because that made me realize, you don't have to keep doing this horrible job the rest of your life, and you don't have to jump out the window because it's not the only thing that you can do. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, him firing me saved my life, I guess, in a way, if you think of it that way. Um, what happened was then we moved back into our original house that we've been in for a long time, 15 years. Sold the new one, went back to a smaller lifestyle, and I actually at one point was saying my goodbyes to my wife. Um, I didn't know that's what I was doing at the time, but that's what I was doing at the time. And the bottom that you're mentioning, for me, what that was, and I've heard it from other folks who have come back from that brink also, was that I had convinced myself that everybody would be better off without me, and that was the last step. So I said to her, it's going to be fine. You're going to be better off without me. And I know that I've disassociated in the past now that I've been through therapy enough to understand that, but I don't remember her face after I told her that. I remember when I told her, and it was in the kitchen of our house, but I don't remember what happened after that. And then when I do remember is my brother was sitting at the table. So I know she called my brother and they came over and they were talking to me about this and they tried to figure it out. And they called the lawyer assistance program. They just figured that out on their own. And a guy over there named Tony Passione, who's in charge over there, he got me an appointment with one of your counselors at KP the next day, and I've been seeing her ever since. And so they got me stabilized. They got me so that I was aware of what I was dealing with. They got me a proper education about my mental health issues, which were, I always thought OCD and anxiety and things like that, but it's really PTSD from complex trauma because my um, childhood abuse and neglect that carried through into adulthood with my parents. Um, and so through all of that, they got me stabilized. I even started medication in the middle of 2019, which I think also got me stabilized to the point where I could even consider getting a job again. And then I finally, like I said, I applied here in December of 2019, and I've been working here ever since. So yeah. So did the job make me suicidal? No. Obviously it didn't. And the more I think about it, I used to trace it back to 17. I remember when I was 17 thinking, okay, I can stay alive because this record exists. And the the record was Radiohead's OK Computer that came out, and it made me realize that there are other people who have these sort of feelings in the world, and that there's other ways to express it, and there's a community of people that you can become involved in, but also just the beauty of the music. So when you're in that kind of a situation, it does come down to what's going to get me through today.
Yeah.
And so music has always been mostly the thing that got me through the day that day. But as I think about it more, I even remember back to almost like 13 now. The more I study it and look back, I really stopped caring about living or dying by around 13. So to go from 13 to 38, that was a real long downhill slide. Um, but uh, yeah, I'm just thankful to be here still. And so I'm trying to use it for, for good now.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, and I'm pretty sure you're aware that I have a nonprofit that is called Shatter
Mhm.
Our Silence, and we talk about the factors that lead to young adult suicide, but suicide in general,
Mhm.
and so I spend quite a bit I would have never thought, if you would have asked me, and I started it in 2000, the winter of 2015, and then we had our first event in 2016. If you would have asked me in 2014, if I'd be spending the majority of my time teaching and educating individuals on the factors that lead to young adult suicide, I would have been like, "You're no, no, I won't be,"
Mhm.
and because I knew what most clinical social workers know and counselors know, but I didn't know enough to talk about it and
Mhm.
let alone teach about it. Um, but that came as a result of being asked to help out with some schools, specifically Rockford Christian, that had lost three out of their 100 students in 2014,
Mhm.
the graduating class of 2014, and so that's how that all started. But we talk about this idea of and I never want to minimize it, but that suicide is this permanent solution
Mhm.
to something that, when we step back away from it, when we get farther down the road, we can see that it was temporary. It was a temporary moment, even though it feels like it's everything, right? and
Mhm.
and I can't hang on anymore, and then there's these unconscious things, probably going back to, like you said, 13, if not before, of this decision to compartmentalize and not feel anymore.
Mhm.
And what comes with that is then not caring, right?
Mhm.
About and we don't even know that that's eroding things away,
That's
uh
100%, is you just don't even, like, I didn't know I was making a plan.
yeah.
Even though I had such a strong and solid plan, I didn't know that I was doing that when I was doing it. And it took me years of therapy to even understand that I had a method chosen and things like that. So yeah, it does sneak up on you.
And I think that why, to your point and to the work that you're doing, is why it's so important for us to talk about it.
Hmm.
And just having being able to invite people to have conversation about, or just to listen, that because there are, especially when there's complex trauma,
Hmm.
there's added elements of that things may be happening behind the scenes. And I've had hundreds of people tell me, well, I just thought this is how life was. I just
Hmm.
thought that this is how life, or this is how life was for me.
Hmm.
And it's like, so it's really hard then for a person to know that it could be different if this is what they've experienced for 2+ decades.
Hmm. Yeah, I used to say I used to have to leave like family gatherings or anything social. And the only way I could explain it to people is that I felt like the room was on fire and I had to get out. Um, but that's what it always felt like to me. So I would have acute anxiety and panic attacks and things like that a lot. And I really haven't had that in years. And I'm not even on any medication anymore for a long time, where my teeth felt like popcorn, like they felt like they were going to pop and fly out, like they were so hot. And that's how it would come for me in like waves. And so in those moments, you obviously know there's something going on. You got to stop, get out of whatever the situation is. But the slow burn background stuff, you just become used to. And at one point, after we bought that new house and everything in 2017, my wife said to me, so, because we had done a lot of repairs on the place and things like that. And she's like, so, everything's done with the house. Are you happy now? And I said to her, I haven't been happy for 1 second or 1 minute of my entire life. And I do remember that look, which is probably why I shut off the second time I said something like that to her. So, and she asked, what do you mean? And I said, well, I don't remember a time when there wasn't a black cloud up here where there wasn't anything else getting through. So the cloud can go higher where I feel like everything's going better down here, but there's always the cloud. And there wasn't ever an opportunity for me to see the sun ever in my life. Like it was always just overcast. And after, God, how long was it? Probably a year of therapy, maybe a year and a half. I was sitting outside in the sun, which is something I like I said, I like to do. And I was just laying on a lounge chair and I felt a warm, it was like a orb or something, like a warm glow inside. And I immediately started to freak out and I said, what was that? And I thought, oh man, that's probably what being happy is. And you just had your first second of it. And so from then on, I've been sort of chasing that dragon, I guess, um, trying to figure out how to put myself in situations where I can be happy for the current moment and not let anything be a black cloud over me. And I would say, um, for a very long time, like I said, I haven't had a panic attack. Like none of that stuff is really happening anymore. I haven't disassociated in a very long time. I remember the last time, but um, once once I really tried to be in the present moment and forget about, um, or I guess forgive myself for being so hung up on things that have happened before, that I realize that that black cloud is just not there anymore. And you're going to have storms come through, obviously, but the overall experience of my life now is not that, and it just isn't. And I'm really happy about that.
When so if Amanda popped into the room, what do you think she would say about what's different about her husband today than in 2017?
Well, so that's also the hard part. So when I started to change because of the therapy and it started to work, she would say things like, "Oh, you're goofy now." I would say, yeah. And she's like, you're just being goofy. You're being silly and laughing a lot all day. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, so that's good. So because yeah, I spent every day with her. And, obviously it's difficult for her to find out that that was my inner journey for all of those years, that that was in the back of my head, because we did have a lot of good times together, and we still do. Obviously, I'm just saying, in the throes of my most horrible year, basically 2016, 17, 18, we were going on international trips and going to New York and sitting at Tavern on the Green and things like that. So I must have seemed like I was enjoying myself. And I don't know the word for, yeah, I was having a good time, but there was this horrible black cloud over my head and I was making plans to kill myself. So I don't know what that would be called. But I know that hopefully I'm a lot better travel companion now, and I can sit with her and just literally be there instead of being triggered by things that are happening around us. And like I said, the whole room is on fire thing, and I have to get out. That hasn't happened in a really long time. One of the last times I checked out was that I was in a grocery store and I got a text message or a call from my mother, and that's always a tremendous horrible trigger for me. And so I was in the grocery store and I was in the gluten-free aisle, and neither one of us is gluten-free, and I was just, she didn't know what I was doing, and she said, come on, we need to go get this stuff. And I said, can we just get out of here? I just need to get out of here. And then so she's like, okay. And then we checked out our groceries, and by the time I had made it to the parking lot, I had come back into myself and I knew where I was. And I said, listen, hon, I just have to tell you, my mom called. That's why I did that. I can recognize it now. I know what that is. And so she just, held my arm and we drove home. So we had a few of those moments, building up until that last one where she could see that I was gone or checked out for a while. And she would try to bring me back. But now that just doesn't have to happen anymore. So I hope that she can relax more when she's around me. She doesn't have to worry about me. She doesn't have to, think that um, she's got to see where I'm at and if I'm in the room anymore. So that's hopefully a lot easier for her.
Sure, sure. Well, and like you mentioned, and I think this is, important for significant others, family members, significant others of individuals who are struggling in that darkness, right? That that we that was your that was Amanda's normal of Adam. That was your
Mhm.
normal for you, and we play characters, and that's how we learn to cope. And that doesn't necessarily mean we're not experiencing certain things or whatever, but it's not at the same, I'll work with someone who's addicted or alcoholic, and they may, let's say they're functional from a standpoint of working, and they're
Mhm.
not mean or whatever, and so it's hard for them to let go of the substance because uh, on society's case, boxes are checked, but it's similar to what you're talking about. It's moving around in a haze and not really being present.
Mhm.
Yeah. So and similar to what we've talked about, regarding the characters that you followed growing up, and in the books you read and the stories you read, there's this piece that when we go through that we get called or thrust into something that forces us to, as Luke was, went into the cave in Star Wars, or I think it was Empire Strikes Back, to fight Darth Vader, and he comes to find out that when his head comes off and the mask opens up, that it's his face instead of Darth Vader's. That's usually who we find in the cave is ourself,
Mhm.
and so as you've gone through this and continue the journey of self-discovery, what are some of the things now that you're, obviously the work that you're doing at the public defender's office, with what you shared earlier. But then you also have some other stuff that you're doing specifically for attorneys, specifically for the greater mental health awareness. So tell us a little bit about the other work that you're doing.
Yeah, so I do have a website, adamstivers.com, and I do put blog posts and things up there. Um, but the goal is to just raise awareness among my community. So since 2019, I've been giving a CLE talk. That's a continuing legal education talk for attorneys, and it's called Preventing Attorney Suicide, which is, pretty stark. and, um, no one has any guesses about what that's about. But the subtitle is Identifying Causes, Exploring Solutions, and Taking Action. So when I first started that presentation, I did my research back in 2019, and I found that 1 out of 10 attorneys had considered suicide. And I just gave it recently back in May of this year. So I updated my slides, and I found that the new information was that it was 1 out of 5. So it has gotten twice as bad in the last 4 years. Obviously, COVID would have some impact, I would imagine, on that because of how it affected everybody's business in general. But so when I gave the talk in May, I said, how many, like sort of towards the beginning, but in the middle, how many of you have ever heard anybody talking like this? And they said none of them. So nobody's talking about this with our community. And I don't know what the issue is specifically, but I can guess. You're supposed to seem like a hard charging, competent, on top of everything person, and it's really hard to admit vulnerability when you're supposed to represent people who are even more vulnerable or in, potentially more vulnerable situations than yourself. Um, and it is also super competitive, and the whole job is changing now with AI. So it's going to get worse in that regard. So being the guy at the firm who has the mental health issues and has to leave at lunch to go for a walk for an hour, but can't, charge through a Zoom meeting because he's got to go take care of himself. Um, that's not necessarily considered a bonus yet in this community. So I'm trying to make that seem like that's the guy you want on the team because he's the one taking care of himself, and he's the one that's going to be here for 10 years, 15 years, and he's going to provide better service to the clients. And so that's really all that I care about spreading the message. I mean, um, I'm not packaging it. I don't have a book or anything that I'm trying to sell full of this stuff. I'm just trying to get the word out there. So I'm on Twitter trying to talk about it, and there's like no engagement on Twitter. I search for hashtags for these topics, and no one's saying anything. I just recently started a LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago, and I'm getting a lot better responses there from people. Um, it's usually just, oh, you're doing good work and things like that, but oftentimes they don't even post it publicly. So the stigma is just wild in the legal profession. It just really is. And all I'm trying to do is break that by coming out and being as open and honest as I can, on as many platforms as I can. There's a lot of places talking about it, but there's not a lot of engagement about it. So there'll be articles from the American Bar Association or the Illinois Bar Association, and they'll post it up, and it's got a nice little picture and everything, and then 2 likes. One of them's me. So like they have
Sure.
100,000 people following them, and 2 of them are willing to click a heart on something that says, let's stop each other from, ending our lives. So it really needs to become something where more people just say, yeah, listen, I have a meditation mat in my office. You want to come and use it? You want me to tell you how to do it? Um, I can come to your office and run you through a 10-minute meditation right now. So, oh, that's the other thing. There's the lawyer assistance program that really helped me. And at the time, they paid for 6 months of me going to therapy. Like, it really is an amazing organization. I'm hoping to become a peer reference locally. So there's these posters that they put in the courthouse that have my name on it, and it'll have Judge Balo and Judge Gibbons and some other people that have gone through this training. But that training's coming up either June or July. I should be able to do it. so that people will know they can just walk into my office and I can help them out. And so, yeah, I'm just trying to get it out there as much as I can that this is an issue. It's something we can talk about. We can get help for it. It is not hard to get help. It's hard to do the work, but it's not hard to get the help offered to you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I know that we had when we originally talked about scheduling today, um, uh, it was right around the time that I was asked to speak. It was my second time speaking to the state's attorneys meet once a year in Rockford, and a few years ago before the pandemic they had me speak, and then in May they had me speak. The topic was similar. I just updated it similar to yourself, was on
Mhm,
secondary trauma and
mhm,
and self-care. And I remember the former, or I guess it was two ago, Bruscato was the state's attorney at the time, and he obviously was there, and brought them through the second part of it, where we do, and I was the last of the day. It was
mhm,
a full day, I think it was, and I was the last speaker, and I brought all these, there must have been 150 of them from all over the state, and I brought them through a tapping exercise, along with a box breathing exercise. And he said to me afterwards, going, Kevin, I'm surprised. I'm glad, but I'm surprised that almost everyone who was there participated in the tapping. So with you're doing this in front of everybody, or I'm doing it in front of everybody, but everyone's sitting next to each other.
mhm,
And I think, to your point, that for whatever reason, and maybe it was because it was toward the middle, toward the end of the talk, and people were, comfortable enough, with the presentation up to that point, or I never expected people not to do it, right? I mean,
mhm,
I'm just, here's the invitation. This is what we're going to do. And, and, and I think, to your point, is that people want to participate in finding ways and techniques to take care of themselves and manage their stress. It's just that they don't always want, or are unsure about, letting people out into the world wide web world know
mhm.
about it, right? And
Yeah.
I think there's something, there's definitely more work around that idea of breaking, we talk about shatter the silence around it. It's
Mhm,
not just the end result of suicide, but we talk about the result of someone under the age of 18 being sexually assaulted, being bullied, struggling with eating disorders of body image, domestic violence, substance abuse, mental illness. Those are the primary things that we talk about, and that suicide happens to be the end result of those factors on top of each other,
mhm,
um, becoming so overwhelming that people don't think that they can, that haze or that cloud will ever leave.
mhm.
You know,
Yeah, and in terms of just learning how to do it, uh, yeah, they're able to pass law school, they're able to pass the bar exam, but they won't figure out how to get through the day without, well, one of the biggest problems is drinking. They said, I think it's around 35% of attorneys are problem drinkers. Uh, so if you just bring it up to drink too much, it's probably way higher than that.
mhm.
And they're afraid to um, go to therapy. They're afraid to be open with even their coworkers, let alone someone alone in a room. Um, and so, yeah, I hope that just posting the things that I put on um, the website and LinkedIn and doing shows like this, my only hope is that I get somebody interested in figuring out how to get themselves through the day in a positive way.
Yeah, yeah.
I have a 14-day meditation course that's free on YouTube also. It's 14 10-minute meditations that people
Okay.
can use. And, um, you know, there's a lot out there. You just have to get moving, figure it out.
Yeah. No,
The best thing is a professional too. You got to go to somebody and they'll tell you exactly what to do.
yeah.
I mean, when I showed up uh, from day one, she had me writing down one good thing that happened that day. And So I got an app on my phone called Day One, and I just started writing one good thing that happened every day into that journal. And I made 1,000 in a row, and then stopped doing it. Like you just, and then she's like, okay, well, let's figure this out. Like, why do you want to stop doing it? Do you think you're okay stopping doing it? And so, they'll tell you that day what you need to do that week to get through, and then come back and figure out, okay, what are we going to do this week to make it happen? So, um, you just never know what little thing you can do that will help you so much. I mean, writing down one good thing, um, was just ridiculously helpful. And you wouldn't even, you don't even have to keep it. Like you can write it down on a post-it note and throw it away, but you at least recognized what happened that day.
Yeah.
And doing a 10-minute meditation every day, it just becomes like brushing your teeth. You just have to do it. You have to do it.
Yeah.
It clears everything away. It calms every part of your body down. Um, Today I do 20 minutes, and I used to use a guided meditation like the ones that are on my website, but now I just do 20 minutes with a ding every minute. I use a it's a high intensity interval training app on my phone where you're supposed to run for 30 seconds and then stop or whatever. But I figured out, hey, I could use this in meditation. So I just set it for 20, and I have it ding every minute to bring me back in case my thoughts are wandering, which they always do. Um, and that's what works for me. So yeah, you
Perfect.
just never know the thing that's going to work. And at the beginning, you really should talk to somebody who can tell you, try this one and see if it works.
Yeah.
So that's all I'm trying to do is give people a push out.
Well, and I think you're 100%, 100% right. And we talk about, and I spend time talking with the therapist, every week we have depending on which office it is, we have a time for an hour. We call it personal and professional development. And for that hour, we talk about either myself or someone I'll have, we'll bring a clip in, or we'll practice a particular, exercise. First, we do it for ourselves, in our own personal journey, and then we do it so that we can then bring it into our sessions, because we recognize that our role, one, we have to do our own journey,
Mhm.
and work our own path, and then so that we can be available to be the guide for someone walking their journey, because
Mhm.
we can't fix anybody. All we can do is walk with them and guide them,
Mhm.
and to your point, we'll give suggestions on what to do, or depending on where a person's at, we may give assignments to where
Mhm.
they're at, because they need more of that guidance and structure, and then it may evolve, right, where
Mhm.
it's less about the assignments, it's more about, you know what, Adam, what do you want to work on today? What are you
Mhm.
bringing to the table? What's come up since the last time we met, type of thing. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's all that part of the journey. But yes, to your point, in the beginning, there are very not only the relationship development, but there are development of goals, and
Mhm.
and the assessment of where a person's at, from a biopsychosocial, mental health perspective, and so then we kind of, build a plan or a treatment plan around that. So
Mhm.
yeah. So when you think of, when you think of something that, and you may have already touched on this, but so if you have, then you could just reiterate that. But if you think of something that you've learned about yourself that you wouldn't have learned if 2018 wouldn't have happened,
Mhm.
what would you say if we were going to give something to the listeners, something that you've learned about yourself that you wouldn't have learned if that proverbial bottom wouldn't have happened?
Mhm.
What would you say?
The word that comes to mind is that I'm resilient. And it's probably because the therapists will say that to me. Like at the beginning, they would say, well, that shows how resilient you are and that you got through that in this way. And they would, point out that I had been using coping skills that I didn't really even know existed or what they were. So yeah, the ability to understand what's going on and adapt myself to overcome that issue, was something I didn't really even think I had. But now I would suggest that I'm one of the most resilient people I know. I mean, I can get through anything if I've been through what I've gone through already. And now I have good tools and nice ways of doing it, and I know that I'm doing it. You can take specific actions to get through things. And so, yeah, my resilience is something I didn't know that I had, but now looking back, I realized, I got through a lot. Um, it it almost ended badly, but it didn't, and I got through that too. So, yeah, I guess that's probably the thing, is that I do have a resilient nature that I didn't really necessarily understand.
Yeah, perfect. You know, in that darkest moment, right, in that darkest time, you said to Amanda, without knowing you were saying it, you reached out to someone who you love, and who loves you, and she maybe didn't know what to do, but she reached out to your brother, and even though he may not know what to do, but they stepped into it. And kind of like, if someone's in the water and they're not able to swim, you know, there's, you may have to get wet, doesn't necessarily mean that you have to join them and drown, with it,
Mhm,
but being able to reach out, even if you didn't believe that there was a possibility that it could change, you still reached out anyways.
mhm,
And even though she and your brother didn't know necessarily what to do, they did something,
mhm,
and reached out to someone who did know what to do. And then the door started opening and the ball started going. And obviously, as you know, there's nothing easy about going into that cave.
mhm,
Because if it was, you would have done it. Everyone would do it.
mhm.
But what you get from it, um, is beyond magical.
Yeah, and it's pretty heavy to have a wife who totally saved your life in a real way.
Yeah.
Um, but she kept me going every day for 22 years so far. Um, and I know now that it's not her responsibility to keep me going. And that was probably too much to lay on her at the time. Um, and it's good that now we can just be, or we're getting to the point where we can just be, and she doesn't have to worry about me as much. But I know that that's heavy. And for people who want to help other people, it is tough. I mean, I lost most of my friends when this happened. I started to reach out and I started to get help, and I realized these people just aren't actually my friends, and I'm not getting any, reach out from people. And so I just left bunch of people behind because they just weren't ready to come on the ride. But then the friends that are still here are even more valuable. Um, and so, yeah, if you have someone and you see them drowning in the ocean, which is definitely what I was doing, um, you just have to throw out a life preserver and try to pull them in. And it it is tough, and it's not something everybody is in the right position to even do. Let's say so. Um, I just hope that if you know somebody that's struggling, that you would be there for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Adam, I so appreciate the work that you're doing, and the journey that you are on and continue. It is, early in the 90s when I first started working, we would talk about substance abuse, and we felt like we had to tell people that treatment works, because
Mhm,
there was such a stigma about therapy and treatment. And your story is a story that it does work if you work it,
mhm,
and if you are willing to, do the keep showing up, do
mhm,
the work, do the work outside of the sessions, right?
mhm,
Which is, it's easy to go to, once you start doing it, it's easy to go to counseling. It becomes harder to do the assignments in between the sessions, and
mhm,
and the continual growth and development piece of it.
mhm,
And so you're fortunate that you have, if I caught what you said, that you have a partner that is also a yoga instructor, um,
mhm,
so that she could recognize, uh, as she's teaching, if she's practicing what she's teaching, that she's able to stay grounded and present as well.
mhm.
So, perfect. So the best way for a listener to get a hold of you or to pass along your information, what would be the best way?
Probably just going to the website, adamstivers.com. I have
Okay.
links all over there for social media, things like that. I have a Twitter and um, LinkedIn now seems to be going well. I'm getting a lot of good positive feedback. Um, I use ChatGPT a lot, the AI chatbot, and it kept telling me, you got to have a LinkedIn page. You're trying to help people in your profession. You got to get on the LinkedIn and link up with people in the industry. So that's what I've done, and so it seems to be going well. Yeah, I'm just trying to get the word out there, but they can reach me at my website. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And I will have that in the show notes as well. So again, Adam, I hope to have you. We'll reconnect and we'll have you on the show again to do another episode. Maybe an appropriate time to do that will be this coming September for Suicide Awareness Month. Would be
Yeah,
a good
sure.
time to have you on again. So,
It'd be
but
great. I'd love to come back anytime.
okay, sounds great. And for anybody that is listening today, if there's something that Adam shared in his story about regarding his journey, and you think that someone could benefit from it, or you yourself want to reach out, obviously there's going to be information at adamstivers.com. If it's a critical moment and crisis moment, please reach out to 988, which is the mental health or suicide hotline. As well as there's a multitude of agencies in the Rockford area or your local agency. KP Counseling is one of them, but there's a multitude of agencies. So as always, I appreciate you being here and look forward to being with you next week.